So let's look at yet another GCSE 6 marker, again with a different topic and slightly different presentation of the question itself. So this one starts with some fairly straightforward text, and it identifies the ability to identify and reduce risks associated with physical activity is essential to minimize injury. Doesn't tell us anything new, it's not the question itself, but it's just starting to set the scenario. The next part of the question says this: for a physical activity of your choice, so you've got to choose a physical activity, explain. So we've located that command word, which is what we need to do first, and it's now asked us to identify how we might reduce a variety of risks associated with that activity in order to maintain physical health. Okay, so we could identify that, but it's not too important because we know that we're trying to reduce risk in this physical activity, and that's the main content of what we need to do. What's different about this question is it then asks us to name a physical activity. And before we just dive in with our favourite sport, we should think about which activity we choose, which is going to have the easiest and most straightforward examples of a teacher or a coach minimizing the risk in that activity. And a really good one to use might be trampolining or gymnastics, because there's plenty that goes on to reduce risks. Wherever you see this named activity or choice of activity, make sure that you use a sport, okay, not just something as vague as athletics, because that of course contains quite a few sports within it. Try to be quite specific. You might mention shot put, or if you were talking about invasion games, you'd have to be more specific than that and identify netball or rugby or whatever it might be. Okay, so a nice specific named example. Let's have a look at the answer then. Again, we've introduced here the first bit of the information. This first paragraph hopes to pick us up some marks, and it helps set the scene for our answer. And it says all physical activities involve some element of risk. It's therefore important that these risks are identified and minimised before and during the undertaking of the activity. The element of risk can include equipment, facilities, warm-up, technique, fitness levels, and balanced competitions. Now, if you've been revising hard, you should recognise this, because these are those key bits of knowledge, the key terminology that we need to include in this answer. And just like we did with SMART targets, the next paragraph is going into each of these in a bit more detail. So, during trampolining, it's vital that all equipment is regularly serviced and checked to ensure that it's in good condition and safe. This will include the use of protective equipment, for example, ensuring that end decks are used and mats to separate trampolines and cover the surrounding areas. So we've got the key information here, equipment, and then we've included an example just there, following a similar pattern than we should have seen before. All participants should adhere to safety rules. Okay, safety rules identified, which may include, okay, so here's the example. Wearing socks, ensuring all jewelry is removed, hairs tied back, spotters are alert and concentrating. With regard to facilities, okay, another key point, and here's the example. Minimum ceiling height is looking at one of the facilities. Should be 8 meters tall. This is to ensure that all participants remain safe. At the start of each session, participants ensure they are sufficiently warmed up. Okay, so there's another key term, so the risk of injury is reduced. Correct technique is another term. Okay, just there. Should be communicated and demonstrations given by the lead teacher. This must be implemented at all times by participants to once again ensure that potential injuries are minimised. Now, of course, we could put these these further ones in, fitness levels of the performer and balance competition, but we have identified them here, and you may of course run out of time to do this really well. So, next bit. If potential risks were not identified, okay, you can straight away spot that what we're doing here is giving the other side of the coin, and therefore minimised, there is strong likelihood of serious injury occurring. Here's the example. For example, if the incorrect technique was being used during a somersault, then under rotation may lead to a neck injury. Another example, we don't necessarily need one, but nevertheless, we're making it really clear that we understand what this key information and why we might go through this process to reduce risk. We understand what it's about. And there you see that example. An insufficient warm-up, okay, again another example of what might happen in the wrong if the risks weren't reduced, is being identified just here. Okay, so here's that other example, and then we've mentioned here the insufficient warm-up could result in not being mentally or physically prepared, and therefore not committing appropriately to the movements. Okay, so these are all examples of when some of those key factors identified here, equipment, safety rules, facilities, correct technique, warm-up, may not have been in place. Okay, what might happen? Remember what we said, it's giving the other side of the discussion. And if we flick back up, okay, we'll see that this explanation, which is similar to a discussion, it's always worth putting in what might happen if it's not there. Okay, so the last bit, again, is a conclusion. In conclusion, there are a variety of risks in trampolining which need to be identified and minimised in order to reduce the risk of injury and maintain physical health. Now, these last sentences, they don't take up a great deal of time, but they do enable you to just close your explanation in this case, to make sure it's clear to the reader that you've finished and you didn't run out of time or something similar. Okay.